Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So it's really good to be here, and thank you for that. I'm just checking out who's here. Hello to everybody. It's good to see you. Thank you for your patience, and I really appreciate your presence. Otherwise, I'd just be talking to myself again. I was thinking of starting with some meditation, but I think maybe given the time, it's looking a bit late, that we should just keep moving with the presentation. And so I'm going to begin by recapping what we did last time in part 1. So I'm going to be sharing my screen. Please let me know if it is not working. So, welcome to How to Heal Your Hate Part 2. So in Part 1, we looked at a variety of things. We mapped out the terrain, looking at some definitions and synonyms of hate. And we looked at the place of hate in Buddhist thought. We looked at how hate arises in the mind and how it ceases. And we started to look at some strategies for dealing with hate. And so for those people who were at the first session, let's test your memory. Can you remember what we did? We looked at the drawbacks, the adinavas, and we explored the similes of boiling water and the sick person for the nivaranas, the hindrances, ill will as a hindrance. So there's the boiling water that's bubbling away in our mind, hatred boiling up, and the sick person who can't enjoy anything at all when they have a mind of hate. We looked at the simile of the inscriptions drawn in the rock, or drawn in the sand, or drawn in the water, and these were the kinds of people who can let go of hatred quickly, slowly, or very slowly in the case of the rock. And we looked at the similes found in AN 5.162 from the Anguttara Nikaya, the sutta on overcoming resentment, where we learned to accentuate the positives, looking at the simile of the dirty rag, the mossy water, the cow's footprint, sick traveller, and the forest pool. So that's a quick recap of where we were last time. And I want to start by re-exploring some of the drawbacks of anger and using the story of Kali and Videhika to explore the danger of unarisen anger. And so what you see here is a picture of a rolling pin, an Indian rolling pin. And this is just a visual mnemonic for you to remember this. And this is from the simile of the saw, which is MN number 22. So this is one of my favorite stories from the suttas. So many of you would have heard me talk about this before. This is a fantastic story about what happens if we think that we've dealt with our anger, or we pretend that we don't have this problem of anger, and what happens when it comes out because it's been provoked. So in this situation tonight, we had a bit of technical difficulties getting to the meeting, and maybe some of us were starting to feel some ill will, some anger coming out. And if only all technical difficulties could be resolved, then I wouldn't need to get angry. Then I wouldn't feel resentment or hate. In the same way, if only other people weren't so difficult all the time, then I could be peaceful, right? This is how we think sometimes. We believe that anger is outside of us, that hatred is outside of us, but actually the place that it arises is within us. And so this story from the simile of the saw is a good example of that. So there's a young maid named Kali, and Kali is a bit of a troublemaker, but she's a good worker. She works hard, she works well. And then there's her mistress, Videhika. And Videhika has a good reputation. She's a good mistress, and she's kind and gentle. This is how she's known in the neighborhood. But one day, Kali says to herself, I wonder if my mistress is pleased with me because she has no anger in her, or if it's just because I do my work well. And so she says, why don't I test her a little bit? And so what she does the next morning is she doesn't wake up. She sleeps in. And the mistress Videhika comes in and says, Kali, what are you doing? Get up. And Kali's like, nothing. I'm not doing anything. She's like, doing nothing. Get up. And so you can see that Kali was quite right. She was testing Videhika, and she could see a little bit of anger coming out. So she thought, she does have some anger. Why don't I test her further? And so then Kali the next morning wakes up even later. And of course, the mistress is very upset. What are you doing? Why aren't you up? Get up. No reason. I'm just laying in bed. And then, of course, the mistress starts to show that anger. And Kali thinks, I was right. There really is anger in her. Let me test her a little bit more. And then the next day she sleeps in really late. And of course, the mistress is very upset. And she's like, what are you doing? And Kali's like, nothing. And the maid's like, get up. And she grabs that rolling pin and she hits poor Kali across the head. And then Kali is bleeding and she runs out of the house and she starts telling the neighbors, see what she did, that woman. You said she had a good reputation. You said she was calm and a good mistress, but look what she did to me. And so this is what happens when anger is provoked, when we can't control our anger or when we haven't dealt with our anger. And this is something that we should be aware of because we are always going to be tested by other people. Everyone in our life, one time or another, our relationships, our family, our colleagues, strangers, they're all like Kali looking to test us. And if we're not careful, that unarisen anger, that unarisen ill will and hatred or resentment will come out. And when it comes out, it's going to cause problems for us. What's going to happen? We're going to get angry. We're going to lose our cool. And you've seen newspaper reports about people who have lost their temper in road rage accidents and gone to jail because of it. Or people have lost their temper with someone and hit them and been punished. And so the consequences of even a little bit of anger arising in our mind is there's a potential for a lot of damage to be done to us, to our reputation, to our relationships. We could lose our job, etc., etc., etc. And so we need to be careful. And we need to know if we do still have anger in our heart. And so this is what I talked about last week, that gap between maybe thinking that we're a good Buddhist or a good practitioner, or we do some metta meditation, and thinking we've dealt with the problem of anger, when in fact we've still got quite a lot of work to do. So this is a cautionary tale. It's easy for us to be kind and gentle and full of love and metta when everything is going our way, but when there's a problem in our life, when there's a difficult person, when there's a technical glitch, what happens then? That's when our skills as a meditator, that's when our ethics and our virtue, and that's when our control of our mind is going to be tested. And that's when it really matters. So that's the story of Videhika and Kali. And so now I want to keep on looking at these strategies for working with hate. And you notice that I call them strategies, not solutions. So one strategy here that comes directly from the suttas is simple and it's tough love. It says, lower your expectations and accept reality. What else do you expect? And this is a story also from the suttas about Dhammika. And so here, a mnemonic for you is this image of a broken tree. And so this comes from the Ankuttara number 6. And this is an interesting story because it's about this ascetic. We're not sure if he's a monk or not, who is named Dhammika. And he's been thrown out of all these monasteries and places where he was trying to live because he was a bit of an irascible curmudgeon. He was someone who was not easy to get along with. Dhammika. And so he'd been thrown out of all these places and he was always complaining and moaning and whining. Probably, if you do the math, look at the one common denominator here, and it was Dhammika, that he was always blaming other people. And he's saying, I'm only like this because these people are like this to me. They said this, they did this, and I got angry, and then they kicked me out. And so this is quite common, isn't it? This is how you see a lot of people in the world are when it comes to problems. You can see some people just have this kind of difficulty in their life where it's always other people to blame. It's never them. And so in this sutta, the Buddha gives a teaching to Dhammika, and he tells a story about a great tree. And the story goes that there's a beautiful big tree that gives a lot of fruit, and it belongs to King Kauravya. And in the tree, there's a tree deva. It means like a god or a demigod who lives in the tree, a tree spirit. And that tree spirit is quite happy there. But one day, someone came along and climbed the tree, broke off some limbs, broke off some twigs, broke off some branches, stole some fruit, and that tree deva, that tree spirit, was very upset. And so he decided that he would stop the tree from producing any fruit as punishment. And lots of people used to make benefit of this tree. So the king was very upset, and he went to see Sakka, the king of the gods. And so when Sakka heard what had happened, what did he do? He sent a storm down, and this thunderstorm completely destroyed the tree. So if you think that poor tree deva was upset when just a few branches had been snapped, imagine how upset the tree deva was when the tree was completely destroyed by the storm. And so then the story goes on, and the king said, the king of the gods said to the tree deva, "Were you practicing the Dharma of trees?" And the tree deva was like, "What do you mean? What is the Dharma of trees?" And Sakka says, "The leaf pickers come and they take the leaves. The fruit pickers come and they take the fruit. The bark pickers come and they take the bark. What else do you expect? This is what it means to be a tree. This is the Dharma of trees." And so this is an analogy. And the Buddha says to Dhammika, this irascible monk, he says, what else do you expect? People are annoying. People will come. They'll take away your peace. They'll bother you. They'll say bad things. Your responsibility is to do the Dharma of an ascetic. Your responsibility is to not react, to not engage, not respond to these things. In the same way that the tree and the tree deva, the tree deva should have just accepted, this is what happens. You can't control. This is what happens. People come, they take the fruit. This is just life. This is just the world. And in the same way, we can understand people are annoying. They do annoying things. You see it on public transport. You see it all. People clipping their toenails, using loud music, shouting at each other. And this is just how it is. You can't control it. If every time the world bothered you, if you became very bothered by it, your life would be a horrible existence, wouldn't it? And so this is a bit of tough love, but there's some truth in it. This is what it means to be a human, living with others. People are annoying. How do you respond when people are annoying? Life is annoying. Life is difficult. How do you respond? So what is your responsibility? How should you react in the face of provoking aggressions from life? What should you do? So this is something for you to think about, I guess, as we keep moving ahead with these images. So this is a bit similar. The next strategy is it could be worse. No matter how bad things are, it could always be worse, right? And this is the story of Puṇṇa, who is this incredibly optimistic and positive monk. And so we learn about him in the sutta called the Punna Awada Sutta. And so here, to help you remember this, there's an image of a person holding a rock, holding a stone. And you see here it says, if they throw stones at me, I'll think, these people of Sunaparanta are gracious, truly gracious, since they don't beat me with a club. And I'll just explain this sutta because it's a beautiful sutta, and maybe after this we'll kind of think about it in a little bit of a different way. But it's about this monk called Puṇṇa, who wants to go and live in Sunaparanta, which is a place which is known to be very dangerous, like frontier lands. And you have to ask sometimes, will you be safe? Even for me as a monk here in Harris Park, even today, people were yelling out the window of the car at me, joking, laughing. And so this is something that happens from time to time for me as a monk. But if this monk Puṇṇa was to go to this bad place and get hassled, and what would he do? How would he react? So he was asking permission from the Buddha to go. And so the Buddha says, what will you do, Puṇṇa, if those people at Sunaparanta abuse you verbally and yell insults at you? How will you respond? And he says, if they yell at me, then I'll just think, isn't it wonderful? They're so kind. They're so gracious. They're so good, these people. At least they're not throwing rocks at me. And the Buddha says, well, what if they throw rocks at you? What will you think then? I'll just think they're so generous, so kind, so gracious. At least they're not throwing knives at me. Or what if they throw knives at you? Well, I'll think at least they're not stabbing me with those knives. Or what if they stab you with those knives? Well, I'll think, at least they haven't killed me. They've just stabbed me. But what if they kill you? Well, then I think, some people go looking for someone to kill them. And here, I'm so lucky they've come to find me without me even asking. There's a bit of dark humor from the Buddha. And this is a bit of a weird sutta. I mean, are we supposed to actually think like this? Are we supposed to just offer ourselves up? Are we supposed to let people beat us with sticks or stab us with knives or kill us? I'm not sure. The Buddha praises Puṇṇa and says, you'll be fine. So sometimes when I read this, I think of it's kind of like a bit of a joke or some dark humor. But there's some truth here. There's something that we can take from it that is very serious. And that is this idea that things could always be worse. If someone's being annoying to you, just be happy that they're not being even more annoying. Something I often think about is if someone's playing like really annoying dance music next door, well, at least they're not playing really annoying heavy metal or death metal, right? Things could be worse. If people are being irritating and it's just a minor annoyance, it's okay. Things can be worse. And in this way, we can put our anger and our hatred in kind of a spectrum, and it helps us manage our response, which is a skillful way to be. It's like you can kind of do a self-assessment. Where am I on this scale? Am I very irritated? Is this something very irritating? Or is this something just a mild irritation? And in this way, we can take some control over our response. It doesn't mean that we need to be some sort of doormat, let people walk over us, treat us badly, but it does mean that we can use some wisdom in learning how we respond to situations. And the same with the previous story of Dhammika and the tree deva. You know, I don't think the Buddha is saying, let people destroy your home and just be equanimous. I think this is just a strategy. It's not a solution, it's a strategy. It's a way of thinking, it's a way of being, it's a way of understanding how our mind works and knowing how to respond in the appropriate way at the appropriate time. And I think sometimes if we just think of reading these things in the suttas as being solutions rather than strategies, we might use them at the wrong time. We might just think there's only one way to do something. There's only one way to think about hate. We have to be completely equanimous, let people trash our home. We have to be like a doormat, let people throw stones at us, kill us. I don't think this is how the Buddha really taught. But what we can do is use this as part of our overall toolkit of dealing with the anger that comes up, the hatred that comes up into our mind. It might be that someone has done something really bad to us, someone has hurt us, and sooner or later we might apply one of these solutions. We might not do it straight away, spiritually bypass, pretend that we're completely impervious, completely unaffected by other people's behavior. We might not do that straight away, but we might be able to get there eventually. Or hearing these kinds of teachings might be able to help us to let go of some of that anger. Because it's so easy to say, just let it go. So easy, especially if you're not the person who is affected. It's really easy for me to sit here, or for Dharma teachers to sit here and say, just let it go. Just let it go. And sometimes you really want to, but you can't because you're hurt, because there's so much suffering caught up in that, because it went really deep. And so these teachings can be part of an overall strategy that you can use. You know, okay, right, this happened to me, but that's just how people are. You know, they're annoying. Okay, I understand. Or, yeah, they did that to me. They stood me up, but at least they didn't break my heart, you know, whatever. So there's a way that we can put these teachings into practice at the right time for us, when we're ready, in a way that works for us. So they're not like commandments or anything like that. These are just ways that we can use the Buddha's teachings and think of how we can apply them in our own life. And that's really important, because that's where the wisdom is, when we apply it to our own life in our own way. So, keeping on moving with these strategies, kindness, contentment, humility, being easy to talk to, unstressed, relaxed, and polite. And so that was my own words that are drawn from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. Many of you will know this sutta. This is one of the most famous discourses on love from the Buddha. And it's a very beautiful sutta. Part of the sutta deals with radiating love to all living beings. May all beings be happy. But the beginning part of the sutta is what I want to look at here before we get to that wonderful deliciousness of spreading love to the whole world. Starts off by saying, this is what should be done by those who are skilled in goodness. This is Bhante Sujato's translation, and have known the place of peace. So these are the instructions. If you want to be a good person, and this is what has been done by people who have found this sense of peace, some safety from anger, some safety from hatred. I think someone might have their microphone on and is chomping on some carrots or something. So if that's you, could you just double check and turn your microphone off? And so it says here, let them be able and upright, very upright. So this is upright in terms of ethical conduct. So when it comes to thinking about an issue like hatred or anger, resentment, ill will, most of us might not think that this is related to our ethical conduct. But of course, there's a link. There's a link in our mind of how we exist in the world, how we use our intention, how we use our mental faculties. There's a relationship between our ethical conduct and our behavior out in the world. And so if we have good ethics, good ethical conduct, we're less likely to have problems. We're less likely to have bad interactions with people. We're less likely to have anger in our heart. Why? So here we have the Buddha saying, be easy to speak to, be gentle and humble. So if you're someone who's easy to speak to, people aren't going to have arguments with you. If you're gentle and kind, then people are going to want to be gentle and kind back to you. And if you're humble, not conceited, then you don't care if someone else is right and you're right too, but they think they're right and you're not. You're like, okay, good. Be happy, whatever, that's fine. You don't need to be right. You don't need to get angry and defend yourself. So you can see here, these are some of the reasons that our behavior, the way we think, the way we talk, the way we act, these things are going to affect our mind. These things are going to affect our interactions with others. And this is what's going to help us keep anger at bay. Keep hatred from overwhelming our mind. And so the sutta goes on saying, be content, unburdensome. Don't be a problem to people. Be easy to look after. Be unbusied. That means don't be stressed out by work and activities. This is one thing that happens when people are really busy in their lives. They get irritable. They haven't had enough sleep. They have been up all night finishing off that work, drinking lots of coffee, just pushing through the day. They're worried, they're stressed, they can't sleep. And then the next morning, they're tired, they're grumpy, and they're irritable. Irritation gives rise very quickly to anger. People, when they're tired, start to do weird things. People might lash out or explode. And so you see how these small things can have big consequences. And these other things like living lightly, being aware of, being aware of what's happening around you, having control of your sense doors, being courteous, all these sorts of things also add up to having a mind that is inclining itself towards wholesome states, positive states, protecting itself from the arising of anger and hatred. So these behaviors of body, speech, and mind are ways that we can cultivate wholesome states, and they also lead to the decrease of unwholesome states. And it says, let them not do the slightest thing that others might blame with reason. This is like, I think sometimes translated, that the wise would later reprove. So this is about mindfulness and strong ethical conduct. And so it might seem like a bit of a jump to go from this place where we blame other people for anger and hatred in our mind because they provoke it somehow, that they're like poking us with a stick and that's why we get angry, or they're playing that annoying music and that's why they get angry. That's why I get angry. Or they did that, they said this, they hurt me, they did that, and that's why I'm angry. This externalizing of blame, externalizing of our anger and hatred. There's a shift from thinking in that way to looking at ourselves and developing qualities of mind that will take responsibility for our mind state, take responsibility for the way that we behave, the way we think, the interactions we have, the way we talk to others, all those sorts of things. So there's a shift there that's really important to acknowledge. The Buddha is asking us to take responsibility because anger doesn't live outside of our minds. Anger and hatred comes from our own mind, and that's where we need to do the work. One of the ways I realized this was that there are certain people, I remember once in my workplace, who were really irritating. No one liked them. Everyone, it was like Dhammika, that monk we talked about before, that was super irritating. And it's like you kind of get to work and you be like, oh, that person, oh gosh. And it's, it feels so good sometimes to have someone who's the target of your hate, it feels good, right? This is why it's such a problem. That person, oh, if only they weren't here, then I could be happy. But it's easy, convenient to have someone to blame, yeah? And then that person left. And then you think, oh, good, now I can be happy. But then someone else comes along and they're annoying. It's like, oh. And then you think, that other annoying person and this annoying person, they have friends. So maybe they're not annoying to everyone. Maybe the way I see them is the problem. Maybe they're annoying to me because the annoyance is coming from me. And it's also true, sometimes if you hang out with people long enough, your attitude towards them can change. And so you see that it's not even that same person who's bringing up these emotions. It's all within you. And so that's where we need to do the work. That's where the responsibility lies. Sure, other people can do really terrible things to us, and we need to be sophisticated and mature in the way that we kind of respond to these teachings. As I said before, we don't want to spiritually bypass. We need to understand that there are really horrible things that happen in the world. There are really difficult things that people go through in their life. And sometimes there's quite legitimate reasons for people to have anger, quite legitimate reasons for people to have some hate. They've been hurt. They've been perhaps abused. They've been injured. They've been vilified, whatever. These things affect us. We need to acknowledge that these things affect us, that we're not, just we're not just divine beings that are completely unaffected by the affairs of the world. We need to acknowledge that these things have hurt us so that we can let them go. But we can work with some of these strategies in ways that help us to let go. So one of the phrases in the Karaniya Metta Sutta, the sutta I was just talking about, is just as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child. And it's such a beautiful image, you know, such a powerful image. And this is one of the archetypes that we have in our culture, in many cultures, of the incredibly nourishing presence of a mother. But there's people I know who had terrible mothers, mothers who hurt them, mothers who caused them suffering, mothers who did terrible things to them or allowed terrible things to happen. And so as spiritual practitioners, we need to be mature and sophisticated. We need to be able to not just parrot these kinds of statements. We need to understand that these are not always 100% true for everybody, and that these kinds of images, though powerful, have limitations. So again, this process of using our own wisdom to understand, and not just repeating these spiritual teachings without thinking about them. You know, the truth is that not every person had a good relationship with their mother. The truth is, a lot of people suffer in life. We can't just tell them, let it go, let yourself be treated like a doormat, whatever. We need to have these strategies that are based in reality. And so I just mentioned that because I think sometimes people, when they come to the spiritual path, sometimes they have a really high expectation of themselves or other people. That's the big one. Other people, especially other spiritual people, will tell us, just let it go, you know, be like the mother to all these beings. And it's hard. It's not an easy path, getting over anger and hatred. We've had these things in our heart for so long. We can't just get rid of them at the drop of a hat. And so I urge you, as people who are mature spiritual practitioners, to have a bit of a reality check and to be generous in your view of yourself and the things that you have in your mind, and also generous towards other people when they have hatred or anger. Don't belittle, don't diminish, don't trivialize what they've been through. You think they don't want to let it go? Letting go is hard. Letting go takes time. Letting go isn't easy. It's something we need to do over and over and over and over again. And it's slow. So we need to be aware of that when we're talking with ourselves or when we're talking with other people. Don't try to force it. Don't have anger towards your ill will. Don't have hatred towards your resentment. Let's let it go with wisdom. So one of the other famous lines in the Karaniya Metta Sutta is this: Sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitata. So this means, may all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. And this is something that we say all the time. This is something that we can use as another strategy of fake it till you make it. We might not really believe it, but we can say it. And gradually over time, we might be able to include everyone within it. It'd be hard. You know, there's people who are problematic. There's difficult people all over the world. And when we say Sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitata, may all beings be happy, it's okay if in the back of our mind there's still a little bit of some resentment or some anger hanging on. The more we kind of incline our mind towards this idea, how lucky we are to even have this idea at our disposal, to have heard that it's possible to love all living beings. So it's something that we can incline our mind to eventually. This is something we're working towards. Might not be something that we've got, something that we're working towards. And eventually we might get there where we can embrace all living beings everywhere with this heart of love. But it's not going to be perfect immediately. It'll take some time. And a good way to test yourself, of course, is to think about those little creatures that many people don't like: mosquitoes, flies, cockroaches, spiders, beetles, snakes, all those sorts of things, all those little creatures. It's quite common in my experience, actually, even to go into people's homes for like a special Buddhist ceremony or something. And as you know, one of the big precepts is not to kill. And you'll be sitting there doing something like giving a Dharma talk, and you see someone like slapping a mosquito. Or what else have I seen? I've seen people spraying cockroaches, and who knows what goes on when I'm not looking as well. But this is not sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitata. These are also living beings. And we've got Sinsin saying, I can send metta to a cockroach, but I don't want them in my bedroom. Ha ha ha. Yes. Yes, if only they could be happy somewhere else. But this is one of those tests of seeing ourselves clearly, seeing ourselves truly. It's so easy to say sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitata. So easy to give metta to all living beings, but then to get up and kill a living being. Even if you want to kill them, I'm not going to judge you or say how you should live your life. But at the very least, I want you to be aware of that gap in between this aspiration and your reality. Be aware of the distance between taking a precept of not killing and the act of killing. Be aware of that. It's very important. I don't want you to feel guilty or to feel judged or anything like that, but just be aware of that gap, because that's where we need to work. Because those motivations to kill might come from fear, might come from anger, irritation, hatred. You see? That's where we need to work. If we want to let go of hatred, and we're constantly throughout the day slapping away living beings, or thinking how we can get rid of those cockroaches. Oh, I should get a bomb and really nuke them, kill them all. That's anger. That's hatred. So be aware of that. Don't spiritually bypass. Don't pretend that it's not there. We need to know what's happening in our mind so that we can work on it, so that we can see, this is what's going on. If we don't see it, how can we let go of it? If we don't see it, how can we work on it? We need to see clearly what's going on. And so I haven't killed anything for many, many years. I haven't killed insects, spiders. I haven't killed little creatures for so long, I can't even remember how long it's been. So I want you to know that it's possible. And instead, what kind of quality do I have in my mind? I don't have this anger or hatred or irritation towards these living beings. At the very least, I have acceptance that they exist. And in my better moments, I have this incredible mind of love towards them, of kindness. Sometimes I have little conversations with them, and I kind of hope that they're doing well and maybe happy. And this is the difference when we incline our mind towards irritation, anger, hatred in these tiny, small ways throughout the day. That's going to be the quality of our mind. We can incline our mind towards kindness, gentleness, peacefulness. That's going to be the quality of our mind. So these things add up. And that's something that we should be aware of. And it's very easy to sit on the cushion and say, may all living beings be happy, and then get up and be mean to our family or friends. It's much more difficult to maintain that mind of love, of kindness, of compassion, wherever we go. And we're all works in progress. I'm not perfect. If you are, I take my hat off to you, because this world is difficult. This mind is difficult. So let's keep going. We have some more strategies. Here we go. Yes, all at once. Melt your cold, hard, unfeeling heart. So I'm suggesting here that you can use some skillful means to soften your edges and get familiar with that mind of love. And so this is something that I do from time to time. Take myself to the internet and I look at cute animals. So this is a very effective strategy for me. I don't know if it will be for you, but I feel so much softness and gentleness in my heart when I look at these kinds of pictures. You see that these animals, even though they might not be natural friends, that they can be nice to each other. And you think, gosh, if you can put chickens, little chicklets on a cat, and a cat with a dog, and these we often think are like natural enemies, and they can get along, why can't I get along with the world? So this is something that I think that we can kind of take into our daily life, is start thinking about ways that we can soften that heart that we have. We want to have love for all living beings, but we've closed down our heart. We've put a little barrier around it. We've put armor on it. We don't let anyone in. We want to keep it safe, secure. But yet, we also want to love all living beings. We can't even access that heart. And, sometimes in life actually can make our heart hard. And we get out of the habit of feeling that sensation of love in our heart, of kindness, of gentleness. And this is one of the things I think that in our meditation practice, you'll see that some people, and I'll never forget hearing one person saying this, oh, I hate metta. She couldn't do it. She couldn't get the feeling of love. And she just thought that metta was this waste of time, or something that she hated hearing about. And it doesn't really make much sense, does it? That you could see like this, but this is the quality of her mind and her heart. You could tell that she wanted to be happy, that she wanted to have some love in her heart. But she had just covered that heart of hers up, put up so much protection, wouldn't let anyone in, and could no longer access the feelings of love. And so you'll see when you practice metta, when you talk to people about their meditation practice, that some people are just naturals at practicing loving kindness, and they can access that feeling of metta. So this is something that I try to emphasize in my practice. I know that Bhante Sujato, my teacher, also emphasizes getting in touch with the feeling of metta, because this is not an intellectual exercise. This is about engaging a beautiful, profound emotion of love, accessing it through our meditation practice, getting familiar with it, tasting it, knowing it, understanding when it's present, how does it feel, what is the effect, knowing when it's absent, what does that feel like? So this is something that we need to do in our meditation practice, is not intellectualize our practice of metta, not deny our emotions, because these are the keys to understanding the mind. You know, when there's anger in the mind, how does that feel? Do you feel good when there's anger in the mind? Does it feel tight, constricted, rigid and stiff? And then contrast that with the mind of love, which feels soft, gentle, like a feather or like sunshine. And to understand the effect of these mind states and how they impact our being, and to know how to develop those states so that you can access them when you need to. This is why in meditation practice I often say, you know, there's this little sun shining at the center of your chest. Like, imagine that. See the light of that sunshine. Feel the warmth inside. Allow it to soak through the body. And that sunshine, that love, is always there inside you when you need it. It's just covered up by these clouds, by the pollution, and it's there, just hidden. My friend, she has a dog, and she used to go into prisons. She had this dog that was like I can't remember the name, like a companion dog or I want to say safety dog or something like that. It's not quite right. But this dog and her used to go into prisons, and they would meet the prisoners, who were often, she said, you know, quite big, rough, and very, very hardened men. And these are the kind of people who you can imagine their heart has been covered over with not just clouds, but, you know, heavy, thick armor. And putting this dog in the room with them, they melt, their heart melts, and they suddenly have this little being to look after and to love. And it's a safe way for them to access this emotion which had previously been denied, that they had denied themselves. And she said they go from being these big, tough men to little boys. So, Enkan, I think your microphone's on.
Sorry.
And so, yes, this is what can happen when we have a tool, a strategy to get our mind back in touch with that feeling of love that we might have had taken away from us by others, that we might have covered up ourselves, or, you know, we're just tired and grumpy, we've had a long day, and we're not feeling the love right now, thank you very much. But we can use some strategies to soften the heart back up. And I say this because it helps us incline the mind more and more to wholesome states. And it's something active and engaged that we can do that takes care of our mind. And otherwise, if we're not consciously directing the mind in this way, then we're unconsciously often being taken away from those minds of love. We're unconsciously allowing for other states such as irritation, resentment, anger, ill will, hatred to arise in our mind, because it's not that we're actively seeking those mind states, but we're not actively inclining our mind away from them. And so unless we do this, actively incline our mind towards the development of wholesome states, then the natural tendency is probably going to be slightly towards the unwholesome states. It takes a bit of effort. It takes a bit of motivation and energy to direct the mind towards these wholesome states. And so that's why, like, I've given a little list here. I'll quickly share it with you of some ideas. And I encourage you to work out your own list of things that are going to help you melt your heart, to get in touch with that feeling of love, to get away from anger and hate. So first one, of course, is play with dogs. You can't be unhappy, you can't be angry if you're playing with a dog. And just in case you're a cat person and think that I am pro-dog, you can also pat a cat. Cats are very soothing, they purr, and it's beautiful. So obviously animals are a good way to soften the heart. Why? Because they're safe for us. They're not as complicated as humans are. I would say you can hang out with kids as well and play games and things like that. Also good. Children and dogs, children and animals rather. Avoid it if you're in the theatre or the acting profession, that's what they say, but they really can help melt the heart. You can watch nature documentaries. This is something I do from time to time, even as a monk, to re-inspire my heart. The world is an amazing place. The creatures in this world are the creatures that I mean when I say Sabbe Sattva Bhavantu Sukhitata. These are part of the experience of being a part of this world. And, you see these animals and they're amazing. And of course, nature's quite harsh as well. You really develop a lot of compassion for animals. I do believe in random acts of kindness, and I encourage you to say kind things to people. Thank the staff. Go out of your way to thank the cleaner that you see on the train. Thank you for looking after us. These are ways that you can start inclining your mind towards this beautiful open heart that cares about other people. So I also do this. Sometimes I'll search on YouTube, look for stories of people being nice to each other just to counteract the news. And there's, people doing things all around the world to help others, to better other people's lives. And it's inspiring, I want to be like that. We can always be generous, kind, and help others. And importantly, treat yourself. Look after yourself. Be kind to yourself. Allow for yourself to have some relaxation, some space, some time, get a massage, whatever, something that can just shift any lingering irritation and resentment, stress, tiredness, just shift that away so that you can look again and freshly at your mind. Also have a break from the news. It can be stressful. And there's a lot of politicians in the news who are targets for our anger, and avoid people who stress you out and trigger you. So this might seem like a cop-out, this idea that you should just avoid these situations. But again, this is a strategy, it's not a solution. You should, from time to time, recognize if people are going to be, if you're going to be able to survive other people, if you're going to be able to survive a situation, you should recognize, am I putting myself in harm's way? If I go and I do this thing, or I go to that place, or I go and see that person, am I going to get stressed out? Am I going to get irritated? Am I going to get angry? And if so, maybe the wise thing to do isn't to test your spiritual powers, isn't to test how much metta you have, but is simply just to avoid the situation until you're feeling very certain or very sure of yourself. And this is something that the Buddha also recommended. It's like, ignore problem people. You find this in the Anguttara Nikaya 5.161, where he recommends, as a solution to dealing with difficult people and overcoming resentment, he says, ignore them. And I remember thinking this was a real cop-out, but actually there's a lot of wisdom there, because often it's other people or other situations that can cause problems in our hearts and minds because we're not perfect. And so it's just good to know that you don't have to be a doormat, you don't have to be an angel, you can be a human working on your mind, working on your hate. We'll get there. We'll get there, people, we'll get there. But we better keep going. We better get to the end of the talk. And so I say to do all of this stuff before we get to the stage of forgiveness and the next one, which is developing that boundless mind of love. So forgiveness, of course, is something that we need to do. This is that letting go. When you have softened your heart up a little bit, when you've developed that mind of love, it's very easy to forgive, actually. When you have some compassion in your heart, it's easy to forgive. And when you have anger, resentment, irritation, it's hard to forgive. It's not easy. Part of the reason is because we get slightly addicted to that irritation or anger. We get in the habit of it. We see that person and we remember what they did. We have that thought and we go back to that sense of hurt or whatever. And we get in a cycle, and that cycle becomes entrenched, and we become like that line drawn in the rock. It's very difficult for us to let go. It's very difficult for us to forgive. But this is what we need to do over and over again, making peace in our own mind. And it's like we're dissolving, slowly dissolving the hate, dissolving the anger until it disappears completely. And this is something that is integral to Buddhism and all religions, I think, probably, that when someone asks us for forgiveness, in Buddhism, we should forgive. And it's actually a monastic offense if we don't, which sounds kind of like, you better forgive, otherwise you're in trouble. But this is how important it is, that when in a monastic environment, if someone has asked us for forgiveness, then we should forgive. And this is something that we do. We ask for forgiveness. In Buddhist culture, we ask for forgiveness. We say, please forgive me for any action of body, speech, and mind that I've done that might have upset you or hurt you. Please forgive me. And the response is, I forgive you. May you also forgive me. And it's very beautiful. And I'll just share this with you. This is a news story. And there's actually many stories like this out there of a mum who forgave a man who killed her toddler, and she treated him like her own son. And when I read these sorts of things, you know, I get so blown away by people's capacity to forgive. You know, I still have some resentment in my heart for things towards people, for things much less than murder. You know, like, I've just got a long way to go. You know, here's this woman who was able to forgive her son's killer, and not only forgive him, but treat him like a son. And there's stories of I'm not sure if it's this woman or another woman who discovered the kind of life that her son's killer had, and she bought him textbooks and put him through education while he was in prison, and gave him hugs and said, I'm here for you. I'm your mum now. I'll look after you. You know, this was someone who took her own son's life, and she was able to forgive him. And so, you know, those little things that we've all got, that someone has done something to us at some stage. I'm not diminishing whatever thing happened to you, but forgiveness is possible when you're ready to forgive. You can. It might be hard. It might take more than once, forgiving over and over again. But we do this not for the person who hurt you, but we do it for ourselves, so that our mind can have some peace, so that our mind can be free from anger, from hatred, from ill will, from this mind which is so toxic and so heavy. The longer we spend with those thoughts in our mind of anger, of hatred, of resentment, those thoughts are harming us. The person who hurt us has moved on. They're not even aware of what's going on in our mind. We're the ones suffering. We're the ones who are hurting. We're the ones with anger. We're the ones with hate. And so we're the ones who need to let it go. And we can. It does take time, and it does take a lot of spiritual capacity to learn how to let go. And so we're almost coming to the end of these strategies. Last strategy is to develop a boundless heart. Sounds easy, doesn't it? Develop a boundless heart. This is where we cultivate a mind that is abundant, expansive, limitless. And this is when we have a kind of mind that is bigger than the hate in our heart. So big that it overwhelms the hate, blots it out, erases it. And so again, back to this simile of the saw, this famous sutta that we've looked at several times over the course of these 2 sessions. And you see here in the second paragraph, we will meditate, spreading a heart full of love to everyone in the world, abundant, expansive, limitless, free of enmity and ill will. Free of enmity, that's free of ill will. Only when the mind is free of enmity and ill will, only then can our love be perfected. And you see at the top here, this earth, looking at the earth, the sky, and the river. And I'll just quickly explain that before we finish up. So in this simile of the saw itself is that famous one where the Buddha says, imagine if there was someone cutting you limb by limb, you should have this mind of love, the same words there, make it limitless and without any enmity or ill will. It's like, that sounds like that's pretty hardcore. That's pretty difficult to do, to have this mind of love when people are cutting your limbs off. Maybe it might be a bit beyond our capabilities. Maybe it's a bit beyond our capacity. Maybe it's just an ideal. Maybe it's not something that was meant to be literal. But there's these other parts of the sutta, which I'll just go through very quickly. There's 5 similes, but I'll just do the first 3. And these are the ways that we can start to think about how this boundless mind of love, this limitless mind of love, might help us in our life. If we can develop a big mind full of love, where our heart is expansive, then those small little bits of hate that might pop up quickly get covered up, quickly get taken away. And so the first image that the Buddha used in this simile of the saw is the simile of someone with a shovel, and they are trying to take away the earth. And they're saying, let me get rid of the earth. Be not there, earth. I'll get rid of you. And, they kind of keep on digging, 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 digging. And of course, the earth is vast. It's very hard to remove all the earth from the earth, right? You see, you can't get rid of the earth, it's big. And so if someone comes along with a little bit of hate and tries to chip away at our vast mind of love, they're only going to get frustrated. They're only going to get tired, in the same way that that person digging the earth with that shovel is only going to get frustrated. They're only going to get tired. In the same way, when our mind is vast and big and full of love, then it's very difficult for someone to take away our happiness. It's very difficult for anger to arise. And in the same way, the next image that the Buddha uses is image of someone painting in the air. Painting in the air. You can't paint on the air. What happens? It will just fall right off, yeah? In the same way, we can be like this. We can be like Teflon. If someone tries to paint some irritation on us, it just slides right off because it's formless. The air, there's nothing for it to stick to. And in the same way, when we develop a mind of love, when we develop a healthy sense of ourselves, a good mental image of ourselves, then there's nothing that can stick to us in that way. It slides off us. We understand they're hurting. We understand their words, they can't affect me. We allow it just to slide off. So this is, again, it's an idealized kind of, it's a utopian, it's something to aim for, but it's possible. And I think probably all of you here have had moments of that. Like today when these people yelled out at me from the car and laughed, like I didn't care, didn't bother me, just slid straight off. But there's other times where if someone says something, then it hurts, So we're going to be able to need to have wisdom for when we can do a practice like this and when we need to develop this kind of practice, when we're not quite there yet. So if something sticks, it's okay. Maybe next time it won't stick so much. And hopefully we can get to that stage where everything just slides off. where anger, if it appears in the mind, disappears, where resentment just drops away. This is something that we can do. This image is quite good. This image of this ink or paint just falling to the ground, unable to take hold. And the third image I'll share with you before we finish up is the image of someone with a grass torch. So someone like with a flame made of a bunch of dry grass. And they're going to the Ganges River, a river that is wide and vast. And they go with this flame and they want to set the Ganges River on fire. And the Buddha says, what do you think will happen? Will the Ganges River catch on fire? No. Why? Because the Ganges is wide and vast. It's cool and it's very wet. It's not going to catch on fire easily, is it? And in the same way, if our mind is like this, if we've been practicing meditation, if we've been practicing good ethical conduct, watching our speech, watching our actions, if we've been inclining our mind towards these wholesome states of love, kindness, generosity, then we have this big, beautiful mind. And someone comes along with a tiny little torch of irritation or hate or problem for us. It's like putting a match into water, just goes out, doesn't affect us, doesn't impact us, is quenched by that big, beautiful mind of love. And so this is how we can heal our hate. So we looked at some strategies tonight and in the previous talk. And so these are approaches that we can take in our life that have the potential to transform our heart. We need to develop an awareness of what's wholesome and what's unwholesome, and develop these strategies to learn how we can let go of those unwholesome states, cultivate these wholesome states. This is our right effort. This is the way that we can develop and maintain wholesome states that transform our mind and leave us with less hate, less resentment, less ill will, and more of the good stuff: love, kindness, generosity. And so I hope these strategies and this talk has been of some benefit to you. Thank you to AABCAP for inviting me, and thank you to everyone who came and listened. May you all be happy, and may you all attain Nibbana.